Next presenter is Sean McKinley from the University of New Hampshire Survey Center. Sean.
Yes, thank you very much, Marco. Thanks for moderating it, and thanks to everybody for listening in. So, as you said, Marco, I'm from the University of New Hampshire Survey Center, and we're just going to walk you through a little bit of what we've been doing with our panels recently. I'm going to share my screen here. Is everybody be able to see that all right? All right, great. So we are the University of New Hampshire, and we have a couple different panels now in New England. For those who don't know US geography very much, New England is in the very northeast part of the United States. And right at the Survey Center, we've been operating for a while now, since 1976. One of the things about New Hampshire that's unique is that, again, if you don't know the the United States political system, that New Hampshire has the first primary. So that's something that we're really most well known for. We do a lot of other things as well. We're very small and self-funded, so we have to do a lot to keep everything going, and we managed to do so. But the thing we're probably most well known for is for our polls surrounding the presidential primary. Usually in the past, we've always done this on the phone, as most organizations like ours have done. But as I'm sure many of you know who have done any kind of phone work, we've had a lot of problems over time, as everyone had, with falling productivity, rising costs because of that, increasing field times, and then finally the effects of COVID-19 really made phone polls, exclusively at the very least, very difficult to continue using, especially in the way that we typically use them with political elections and things like that. Very, very difficult to continue doing so. So what we started to do is put together state level panels in each specific state, starting just in New Hampshire. We started recruiting in 2017. And what we did while we were still doing phone surveys is just asking people when they had answered on the phone, hey, would you like to join our panel, or would you like to be contacted again in the future? And since then, we've also started using some ABS surveys where we send out things like a postcard asking people to join and log into a web page so that they can take a web panel. But then we also conduct text-to-web surveys where we text large numbers of people and have them do a survey and then ask them if they'd like to take further ones in the future by joining our panel. We have 3 different panels operating at the moment, really at full levels of operation. We're working on others. One's in New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. Those are the 3 northernmost states in New England. And we have about 10,000 panelists recruited, put together. So it's a pretty robust number of people. Many of them are in New Hampshire because it's our home state and we've been recruiting there for longer amounts of time. And we only recruit from probability-based methodologies, as I mentioned up here, getting people and kind of using the phone as we had before, and now as much as possible trying to replicate what we had on the phone. And one of the things that we do too is we keep the incentives very low. We don't have very strong incentives for people. We don't give people any kind of monetary compensation per complete, so we can operate things. We can send out our surveys without individual really level costs apart from our own time to put them together. The first test of the panel that we really put together was in 2020, when what we actually did, or in 2020, excuse me, when we started using the panel for the presidential primary, that first one I mentioned that's important. And my colleague, Zach Azem, actually last year at another conference presented this. We were testing, does this work? Are we as able to predict what's going to happen as we might have on the phone? And he found the 3 key findings we got from this were all quite positive, that the web panel is actually slightly more accurate than when we did it on the phone contemporaneously. And then also, this is another big problem that we have with primaries, is that there's no kind of partisan cues to how people are going to vote. So oftentimes there's very late momentum. There's only usually Iowa as a preceding contest, so we don't know which candidates are strongest. When there's large fields of candidates, people can change their minds a lot and at the last minute. This happened in 2020, and the web panel actually picked up that late momentum of Amy Klobuchar better than our phone poll did. And then we actually also got more people to participate in the web panel. So really all of the hopeful things that we were the things we had hoped for, my colleague Zach showed that we were able to accomplish. In light of this, we adopted fully our panel. And especially with COVID-19 hitting not long after, we decided to switch to just using our panel rather than using the phone. And we conducted a bunch of different research on many different things since then, including the New Hampshire state primary, which is the primary for more minor offices in the state, the 2020 general election in New Hampshire, a referenda election in Maine, where voters decide on 3 different issues, specifically voting yes or no. And then also COVID-19 vaccination rates in New Hampshire and Vermont. So we've conducted a lot of research. We typically send out polls in New Hampshire every month. And then in other states, we've been sending them out bi-monthly or monthly. So we're collecting a lot of data. But one of the things that we need to do, again, like we did in our previous test my colleague looked into, is we want to just keep testing the data and keep making sure that our panel's results are matching reality as much as possible, that we're able with our panel to actually put out predictions and put out our results that are actually realistic and reflective of the real world. And some of the ways that we did this is by looking at the end results from these things that we predicted. You can see in these primary elections, for instance, we were relatively close in these 5 races, the 5 major races we looked into. Primary races, like I said, they're more volatile, they're harder to predict. We had fewer panelists then as well. We have about twice as many in our Granite State panel now as we did then. There's limitations with congressional primaries, these bottom 2. We are only sending to half the people because there are 2 congressional districts in New Hampshire, so lower ends here. So in any circumstance where you have low ends, you're going to have a harder time correctly predicting these things. But despite all of that, we still correctly predicted 4 of the 5 races, and the other one we decided was too close to call because it was largely tied. So we still did pretty well here. The main place that we did very well was in the 2020 general election. This is when we get a lot of attention. Obviously, it was a really many people were looking at this election and considering it. And we did really well in predicting it. Our prediction was almost exactly correct, especially considering the don't knows or undecideds for the presidential race, for our governor race as well. We were very accurate. So this was a really, really good sign. And it not only allowed us to do this accurately, but allowed us to do it with a much, much lower cost and made it a lot easier for us to actually accomplish. We also, like I said, talked about this referenda election, which are relatively unusual. Most states in the United States don't have them. New Hampshire doesn't, but Maine does. And we asked about these 3 different referendums. And again, largely accurate results. They weren't actually too close, they ended up being. But this is especially a difficult election to predict. I believe in the past when people have tried to do this with the phone, it's also very, very difficult because there are elections with low turnout and many people don't actually entirely understand what the issues they're voting on are. We also asked people about that, and large numbers of people said they only understood what these questions actually meant somewhat well or less. So given that, and given the amount of people who may or may not vote or said they don't know, we actually did quite well here as well. And then finally, we also looked at COVID-19 vaccination rates. So here you can see that we have slightly overestimated the number of people, the 2018 or the 18 and over population that was vaccinated. However, there are some reasons to think that this might be a little bit closer. You can see this green line is the vaccination rate in New Hampshire, and the orange is what we were predicting based on our panel results. But social desirability, at least among some people, it's likely that maybe a few people might say that, oh, I'm vaccinated, even though they weren't. But the other issue is that, especially in New Hampshire, there's been significant issues with the data surrounding vaccination. Just today, there was an update that they've actually upgraded this number for 2022 just a couple percentage points higher because of issues surrounding pharmacy data. So it's likely that this is actually a little bit higher and that these 2 are matching relatively well. Similarly, in Vermont, we asked just once in November, and we saw pretty close to what the CDC was telling us in our results here. So again, quite good results that we're getting here. One of the reasons that we did really well here is because we wait. By 2016 and then recently 2020 presidential vote. A problem in New Hampshire is that there's a lot of people who say that they're not a Democrat, they're not a Republican, and we need to wait to get the correct mix of people. Our panel, as you can see here, is got a lot more Democrats, but a good amount of independents as well. It underrepresents Republicans. And we have to cut between those independents, between people who are likely Biden voters or Trump voters, Clinton voters and Trump voters in 2016. And this also helps in places, in states where there isn't partisan registration, like in Vermont. And the other thing that this allows us to do is just gather so much more data. You can see in this chart here the amount of omnibus survey responses we collected from 2001 through 2019, and then the large jump once we started using the panel. And this just really shows that I think for people in our type of industry, organizations like ourselves in the United States and perhaps elsewhere that do this kind of work, this is a very robust system that we've put together. It's very cost effective, it's very durable, and it's also something that seems to be producing results that are quite reliable for what we are trying to do. So we're going to continue doing that in the future. We have the 2022 elections in Northern New England, and we're going to expand to Southern New England states as well, and look into other, of course, research other areas about how to maximize and make our panels as efficient as they possibly can be. But really what we're trying to say is just how useful of an option as this is for going forward in the future and having a sustainable kind of operation. So thank you for listening, and be happy to take questions at the end when we're ready for that.
Thank you very much, Sean.